Hi, Hampden. Thanks so much for joining me. Today we'll be reading chapters 40 to 43 from our One District, One Book, Save Me a Seat. Joe. Do you know who the card belongs to? Mrs. Beam asks Lucy. Lucy nods, but doesn't move. Is something the matter, Lucy? Asks Mrs. Beam. I don't want to see the leeches, she whispers. What's so scary about a couple of stupid old worms? Sneers Dylan. Ever since Mrs. Beam shut down his superstar routine, he's been acting kind of grumpy. Lucy gives him a dirty look. Hallelujah! Maybe this means the wedding is off. Ravi has his hand up. Yes, Ravi, says Mrs. Beam. I notice she says his name right. Says his name right from the first time, with the accent on the second syllable. Could you please tell Lucy Mulligan that the lid on the jar is screwed on very tight? My grandfather and I made sure of that. The leeches will not escape. Nothing to worry about, see? He lifts the jar and turns it upside down. No water leaks out, but turning the jar over like that gets the leeches all freaked out, and they start wiggling around even more than before. I expect Lucy to start screaming again, but instead she walks over and tosses the card down on Dylan's desk without even looking at him. Then she turns and smiles at Ravi. I didn't know you knew my name, she says, tilting her head to one side. I look at Dylan to see what he's making of his disgustingly mushy moment, but he isn't paying any attention to Lucy. He's got his eyes glued to the jar of leeches. I know that look. I've seen it 1,000,000 times before. Ravi, it's your turn to pick a card, says Mrs. Beam, holding the basket out to Dylan. He groans. This game is so lame. What's the point? You can't even win. Try to muster a bit more enthusiasm, would you please? Says Mrs. Beam. Not every game has to be about winning. If you ask me, Dylan is getting off easy. Mrs. Arun would have made him kneel down on the floor or sit facing the wall if he had talked back to her like that. Dylan makes a big show of swirling his hand in the basket to stir up the cards. His overacting is even worse than Sakti Kapoor's. I can't believe I even wanted to be his friend. Abracadabra, he says, pulling out a card and waving it in the air like he's done something special. Nobody responds. Not even Lucy Mulligan, who's busy staring at me for some reason. Dylan shakes his hair out of his eyes and reads what is written on the card. Quitting is not an option. He rolls his eyes. Gee, I wonder who this would be. This could be. Then he marches straight over to Tim or Jim, I still don't know which it is, and puts the card down on his desk. Is it you? Dylan asks, in a voice that says he's confident his guess is correct. Nope, says Jim, shaking his head. It's not me. Dylan can't believe his ears. What do you mean it's not you, he says. It has to be you. Everybody knows you're the kid who just won't quit. Jim looks at him and shrugs. It's not me, he says. You see, Mrs. Beam's pistachio's eyes are twinkling like little green stars. Maybe this game isn't so easy after all. Well, if it didn't write it, who did? Asks Dylan, looking around the room. I wink at him and smile. I did, I said. Joe. He cheated, shouts Dylan. That's why I couldn't guess it. What do leeches have to do with quitting? Would you like to come up to the front of the class and tell us how the things are connected, Ravi? Personally, I would have been sweating bullets if Mrs. Beam made me stand up in front of everybody like that. But Ravi doesn't seem nervous at all. In fact, he looks happy. He pushes up his glasses and clears his throat like he's about to give a speech or something. I'm listening, but I'm also keeping my eye on Dylan in case he tries to mess with Ravi's leeches while he's busy giving his speech. Quitting is not an option, Ravi says. This is what my father taught me and what his grandfather taught him and what I will teach my own son someday too. Big deal, says Dylan. What does that have to do with leeches anyway? I told you he cheated. Shh, says Mrs. Beam. Go on, Robbie. Robbie pushes up his glasses again. I haven't prepared anything else to say, but I could tell you a story if you like. Ravi. I rub my nose and push up my glasses. My hands are shaking a little, so I fold them together the way we were taught to do in elocution class at Vidya Mandir. For many generations, the Suryanarayanan family has worked with tea. I begin. When my grandfather was a young man, he worked in the tea plantations. His job was to protect the tea pluckers from wild animals that might be lurking nearby. I look around the room. Everyone is listening. Some are even leaning forward in their seats. I decide to bring in a bit more drama into the story by adding a few details Peripa had not included in his version. Have you ever been attacked by a porcupine or a wild boar? I asked, pawing the ground with my foot. Have you ever seen a panther crouching in the grass ready to pounce? Or been stuck in the middle of a war between two angry elephants? I pause and look around the room for dramatic effect. All those years of elocution lessons are really paying off. Imagine it is the monsoon season, I say. Imagine the ground still damp from the heavy rain, a perfect hiding place for the most dangerous creature of all. Most dangerous than the porcupine or even the panther. This animal can latch onto you and bite through even the toughest flesh with its 300 razor-sharp teeth. What the heck? Says Jax. Be quiet, Caleb Burrell tells him. I want to hear about the teeth. This is no time to lose momentum, so I take a deep breath and dive back into the story. Well, my grandfather battled these tiny Draculas in disguise every single day. Imagine yourself plucking tea under a hot sun, when suddenly you realize you are surrounded by vicious black worms waiting to fix themselves to your body and drain your live blood out. Look, there's one between your toes. Be careful. There's one behind your ear. Believe me when I tell you, these dreaded blood-sucking leeches can even crawl up your nostril. Just as my tale is building to its climax, I am interrupted by a loud, choking sound. A moment later, the air is filled with a horrible smell. Check it out, shouts Dylan Samreen. Emily Mooney just blew chunks. Well, thanks so much for reading with me today. I can't wait to see what happens next with Ravi and Joe.